Okay, welcome back. We're going through October, November 2021, question paper 12. So again, we'll start at the bottom. Like all the other papers as well, there are some duplicate questions. So question 30 is a duplicate question, for example. So I've already explained the answer in October, November 2021 QP11. Just go view that video if you want the full explanation for this answer. Okay, and I'll do the same for the other questions that repeat themselves also. Okay, question 29. The US imposed tariffs on cars and motorcycles from Germany. What is the effect of these tariffs? So remember that a tariff is a tax, and it's a tax on imports. Okay, so what's it going to do? Is it going to decrease inflation in the US? No. In fact, it could actually increase inflation, because it might end up on US customers paying more for cars and motorcycles, which might be a necessity good, so they'll still have to spend the money, and that might increase consumer expenditure in the economy, and it might actually increase or cause demand pull inflation. Will it increase the standards of living? No. They're buying less goods and services from Germany now, so they're probably getting them at a cheaper. They were getting them at a cheaper price, but that's not going to have an effect on the standard of living. If we put a tax, it may actually decrease the standard of living. They may have to pay more for inferior quality products. Increase in profits of cars and motorcycle producers in Germany, that's also wrong. So the car and motorcycle producers in Germany, they're going to be making less profit now because their exports to the United States are being taxed. So there'll be less people in the United States buying their products, which means their profits will reduce. But what it will do for sure is it will reduce the trade between the US and Germany. If we put a tax on imports, there'll be less people in the United States buying German cars, so the imports between Germany and US will decrease prior to what it would have been before we put the tax in place. Okay, 28 is from QP11 as well, so same thing. Go look at that video for full explanation. 28, sorry. 27. A country specializes in the production of steel, toys, and textiles. Okay. What is a disadvantage of specialization to the workers, or to the country's workers? Okay. They cannot afford to buy products from other countries. That's not true. It doesn't affect their purchasing ability to buy from other countries. They have too much choice, which wastes their time. That's also not true. They don't tell us choice of what, but also it just means they're more productive. It doesn't mean they get any more choice. They have to learn a variety of skills. That's not a disadvantage. That's an advantage to the workers, because they get to learn more skills which they can use in the future. However, a disadvantage would be they could become structurally unemployed if global demand changes. Okay, which is true. If they're specializing in steel, toys, and textiles, that's what they are focusing on, that's what they're good at. So if the demand for steel, toys, and textiles reduces, a lot of people in the country will become structurally unemployed due to, example, technology, and then they'll have to be retrained to get jobs in other industries. Now remember, structural unemployment is one of our 3 types of unemployment, and it's unemployment that occurs, like the example gives, because of global demand changes or because of technological changes, which mean that the skills people previously had are no longer needed. 26 is also from QP11. Okay, question 25. What is the effect on an economy of net emigration of people aged between 20 to 40. So remember, net emigration, what does that equal? That means more people out than in. More people are leaving the country rather than coming into the country. Net immigration is more people coming in than going out. Okay, so very simple. If this is a bit of common sense really, if we have net emigration, more people leaving and they're aged between 20 to 40, so they're quite young, what's that going to do? Is it going to result in a more mobile labour force? No, because the people who were mobile, the 20 to 40 year olds, the people who are willing to move cities or move areas to get jobs because they might not have families established yet, they've left the country. So our workforce is going to become more immobile. The same with government revenue and rising house prices. Okay, the demand for houses is going to go down if we have emigration of people at the normal age that they're buying houses. And same with government tax revenue. If most of our workforce who are aged or are within working age are leaving, government tax revenue will likely reduce. What it will result in is the population getting older, because our young members of the population are leaving in search of work. The elderly people will still stay within the country. Okay, poverty in households may be defined in relative terms. What indicates relative poverty? Okay, so remember the definitions we've given in other papers as well. Absolute poverty, that's living on less than $2 a day. So that's absolute poverty. Lack of access to clean water is also absolute poverty. Remember, it's living on less than $2 a day, not being able to afford basic needs or basic necessities. So income level required to meet basic needs similarly might indicate absolute poverty if their income level doesn't allow them to meet those basic needs. So the one that indicates relative poverty would be falling below society's expected standard of living. Relative poverty, if we remember the definition we have, or that we came up with in class, we talked about it's feeling poor in comparison to other people around us. Okay? So it's feeling like we don't have as much money as other people that are around us have. Okay, 23 is from QP11 as well, so same thing. 22 was removed from the paper, so we're going straight to question 21. Go back and look at QP11 video, same October-November sittings for those answers for 23, 26, 28 and 30 if you need. Okay, how do we measure the rate of inflation? So the rate of inflation is measured through CPI. And if you remember that, that's the Consumer Prices Index, which is basically measuring a basket of goods and services. Okay, how do we measure it? We calculate the change in the price of goods and services from one year to the next. And we get our CPI figure. The real value of all output in goods or services, that's GDP. That's not calculating the rate of inflation. For B, calculating the total number of people willing and able to work but cannot find work, that's calculating unemployment. And total value of exports minus total value of imports, that's our trade balance. That's a funny looking B, but you know what I'm saying, trade balance. So that one will be A, very straightforward. Okay, which supply side policy measure would help to match the skills of workers to job vacancies? Okay, difficult enough question here. Which one of these, now there might be more than one that would be a supply side policy, which one is actually going to help people find jobs? That's what we're talking about here, or is most likely to help them find jobs. Okay? Encouraging the modernization of factories, that's not going to help people find jobs, because that's going to encourage employers to use more capital and not use as much labor. If they reduce taxes to provide incentives to work, again, that might increase people wanting to work, but it's not going to help them find these job vacancies. Okay? Same thing with offering retraining. What's that going to do? That's going to give them new skills, but it's not actually going to find jobs for them. So the best option here would be D, replacing government enterprises with private enterprises. That supply side policy that's referenced in your slides and in your notes is called privatization. Okay? Taking a public sector firm and making them private sector. Now, why would that help them to find jobs? It'll help them to find jobs because these private enterprises will do it themselves. They're the ones that are going to start to advertise the jobs when they set up their firms, and that information should get back to the people who are looking for jobs, and it will also create more jobs as they become private enterprises. So the skills that they'll now have, those private enterprises will do the searching for the people, and then the people can contact them and get a job easier than if the government retrains them. They still have to go searching for the jobs themselves, etc., and there may not be enough available. Okay, government shows a receipt taxation. 19 is also from QP11. So again, just circle and go to that video if you want the full explanation. Okay, what is the consequence of economic growth for individuals and for the economy? So we need to remember that an increase in economic growth means that our real GDP is increasing. Okay? And one thing that we definitely don't have is we don't have an increase in poverty, especially not absolute poverty, when we have economic growth, because people in the country are getting richer. We also don't have an increase in unemployment. At least it's unlikely. So we're left between B and C. Now, B is the most suitable option, and why? When real GDP increases, we say that national income goes up, employment goes up, living standards go up. For GDP to increase, we have to have an increase in the output, which is the amount of goods and services that are made. C says we've just had an increase in the variety of goods and services. That's not going to cause economic growth, right? And just because we have more goods and services being made, it doesn't mean that we're making a variety of types of goods or services. It just means that we're making more goods and services. So our national income will go up, and then very simply it matches to the economy. If our national income goes up, people will be paying more tax, so the government will be collecting more tax revenue. So B is our answer there. Okay, question 17. What is a cause of demand pull inflation? So remember, demand pull inflation is where AD goes to the right. Okay, and if we put our components of AD over here, our abbreviations, we have consumer expenditure, investment, government spending, exports minus imports. So any one of those goes up, that will move AD to the right, and that's what we're looking for. So a surplus of skilled labour, that's not a component of AD, so that's not going to move AD to the right in these circumstances. High government expenditure, we can see here G represents government expenditure, and if that goes up, AD will also go up or move to the right. So we're looking good for B. Higher tax rates. What's higher tax rates going to do? It's going to result in people having less money, right? and firms having less money also. So it's actually going to move consumer expenditure and investment down, which will move aggregate demand to the left. Okay, so that's not going to result in demand pull inflation. It will actually move AD the opposite direction. And the same thing for lower net exports. Net exports is X minus M, and the idea behind it's very simple. Exports are bigger than imports, we move right. So if we've lower net exports, that means our imports are going up and our exports are going down, let's just assume. So AD will move to the left, not to the right. So we're left with B is our correct answer. Okay, quite a tricky one here. Make sure they don't catch you out with this. An economy recorded a second month of deflation. What does this mean? So, it faced a recession is wrong. It would have to face 6 months of real GDP falling for it to be a recession. Okay, deflation, remember we can have deflation where we have AS move to the right. We call that our good deflation, and real GDP will actually increase in that circumstance. Okay, total demand was rising, so no. Why do we have deflation? AD has likely gone left. Okay, so aggregate demand or total demand is likely to be going down, and unemployment was falling. If AD goes to the left, we're likely to have an increase in unemployment because our real GDP will also go down. And you can see that here. I don't need to label the full thing. This was our initial real GDP. This is our new real GDP. National income down, living standards down, employment down. What it does mean for sure is that the price level is going down. And we can see that here on the graph that we've drawn. AD goes left, price level goes down. Okay, two car manufacturers agreed to merge, so they're coming together. What outcome would be a disadvantage for customers? Okay, increased capital for research and development, that's an advantage for customers. Why? Because in the future, they may be able to offer cars at cheaper prices if they make technological advancements. Lower average cost through economies of scale. Similarly, that's an advantage for customers. Why? The cheaper they can make it, the cheaper they're going to sell it for the customer. At least we hope so. Reduced range of vehicles produced, that would be a disadvantage. They don't have as much choice. And use of a wider range of marketing information, again, that's an advantage. They're going to be giving more information to the consumer. Okay, so the only disadvantage we really have there is C, where their choice will be reduced because of the merger. So two companies merge into one, they've got one less company to choose from. Okay, question 14. The table shows the average total cost of a firm over a range of output. What happens after 4 units are produced? So we're just looking at this section in here. And we can see what happens. Our total cost is going up. Goes from 5 to 7. That's our average total cost. And then from 7 to 9. Okay, so we've got to find or match one of these reasons to why our total costs will go up. So if they receive significant discounts from bulk buying, that should mean that their average total cost will come down, not go up. So we know that that can't be the correct answer. if they pay lower interest rates to banks, okay, again, that's a positive thing for the firm. It doesn't explain why their total costs would go up. Again, the money that they're paying back to the bank may reduce their total costs, especially if it's a lower interest rate. And if they gain the benefits of merging with another firm, again, why would that explain why average total cost would go up? It doesn't explain it at all. Benefits of merging, we'd have to assume their total costs would come down. So the only logical explanation we have is that they've experienced management problems, and as they produce more output, they're not efficient at managing their costs, probably because the management don't have the resources available to manage those costs effectively. Okay, this is a difficult question. Diagram shows the total cost curve for a firm. What can be concluded? So A, it has no fixed cost. Now, remember that our fixed cost is shown by the costs that are represented when we have 0 units of output. And we can see that we start here, which is above the 0 line. Therefore, that's not true. We can see here we have fixed costs. We have no variable costs. Well, if that was true, our total cost curve would look like this. It would stay the same. As our output increases, we can see our total cost is going up, so we know that we have variable costs. Its average fixed cost increases. Okay? Now that also can't be true, because its average fixed cost, you can see from the curve, it's likely to actually decrease because fixed costs stay the same amount. It's likely to decrease as the quantity goes up, right? As we make more, this fixed cost amount here will be divided by the number of output, so it will generally go down as we produce more. What we can conclude is that its average variable cost is constant. Okay, so we can see from the curve that here's our fixed cost, and this would be our fixed cost line, right? We haven't been given it, we've only been given total. And we can see there's a steady increase in variable costs then, this area here, as our output increases. Now we know it's constant because of the shape of the curve. If the variable cost was increasing, our total cost curve might look something like this. So in that case, we would see a movement upwards as we get to a certain quantity, right? If it was decreasing, it might look something like this, where we would see a movement downwards after we reach a certain quantity, okay? Which would tell us that our variable cost is not constant. It's either decreasing after a certain level of output or increasing after a certain level of output. So the shape of the line determines or tells us that it's constant. Okay, question 12. The diagram shows the imposition of a subsidy on a product supplied by a firm. So what we can see happening here is that the supply curve has shifted to the right. Okay, what area represents the total revenue of the firm including the subsidy? Okay, how do we find total revenue? It's the price that we're selling for, right, multiplied by the total quantity that we sell. Now when we're representing a subsidy, one thing we need to remember is that if we look at K to H here, K to H represents the actual level of the subsidy. Okay? Remember that a firm, if they receive a subsidy of, let's say it's 10 RMB, okay, they don't want to reduce the price of the product by 10 RMB. They want to collect some of that for themselves. So they may only reduce the price by, let's say, 4 RMB. And then they get to keep the extra 6 RMB for themselves, right? So they're only going to pass on this area of the subsidy, right? And then the other area they're going to keep for themselves. So the total area of the subsidy would be HKEG, right? Split between benefit for the consumer and the benefit for the producer. Okay, benefit for the consumer would be the change in the price. Benefit for the producer would be what they get to keep from the subsidy. So that would be the total area of the subsidy, but that's not our question. The question is the total revenue. So we know that we've got to include this area here, which is our quantity, and then we've got to include the area of the subsidy also. So it's going to be OGHM, which would represent all of the revenue. So D would be our correct answer here. Okay, question 11. What result of increased specialization in a firm is an advantage for the firm but a disadvantage for the worker? Okay, so greater mechanization, higher labor productivity, higher skill levels, or longer training times. Okay, longer training times is not a disadvantage for the worker. Okay, and it's also like not really an advantage for the firm either, because the longer they're training, then the less time they have to actually make something. It may be an advantage in the long run, and it may be an advantage in the long run for the workers too, because they may get better skills out of it. Higher skill levels is obviously not a disadvantage for the workers, but it is an advantage for the firm. And higher labor productivity is an advantage for the firm, but it's also an advantage for the workers. They may be able to get more wages out of this. If they're making more and they're creating more value for their business, they may be able to get paid more for doing so. However, if we've got greater mechanization, what does that mean? It means that we're using more capital, right? We're using more machines. And why will that be a disadvantage for the workers? Because the workers may be replaced by the machinery. Okay, so they may actually lose their jobs as a result of the machines being used instead of labor. Okay. Question 10 is actually, I thought it was from QP11, but it's not. So it is a question that has appeared on the exam papers definitely more than once. I remember answering this question maybe 2 times. Maybe 2 times on other papers, but possibly they were in different years. So it's a good question. Diagram shows the wage rates of cleaners and nurses. Okay, and what can we see? What will happen if a national minimum wage of OM is introduced? Okay, so in cleaners we can see here's the equilibrium wage at the moment, and here's the minimum wage. So what's going to happen if a minimum wage is introduced? We can see we'll get to disequilibrium, but the question isn't even asking us for that information. It's just asking us what's going to happen to the wage rate. So we can see here, if the minimum wage is introduced, the wage rate is going to increase for cleaners, right? It's going to go up along our vertical axis here. So it will rise for cleaners. Now we just need to see what's going to happen for nurses. Okay, so here's our equilibrium and here's our minimum wage rate for workers. Now we can see that our minimum wage is actually below equilibrium, right? So therefore, if we introduce a minimum wage for nurses, it's not actually going to affect the wage rate. Why? It's not going to fall because if it falls, they'll be in disequilibrium and they'll have not enough nurses to fill the demand for nurses. So employers will quickly realize, or the price mechanism will work in order to restore it to equilibrium if they change it, right? So over a long period of time, it's not actually going to affect it because the minimum wage is below equilibrium. So it's going to result in no change for the wage rate of nurses. Okay, question 9. Which government policy will increase productivity? Okay, Decreasing the number of training programs will definitely not increase productivity. It will decrease productivity because people will have less skills. Encouraging labor-intensive production will also decrease productivity. Why? Capital-intensive production is more productive than labor-intensive. Okay. Reducing private sector investment, again, that's going to decrease productivity. We're going to have less money being invested into the industries. Okay, so again, that will be things like we've got less investments in research and development to have better practices. We've got less investment in capital equipment and machinery. So we're going to be relying on labour more than the capital again, and that will make us less productive. But if we promote good industrial relations, what are we going to have? We're going to have good relationships between trade unions and employers. Okay, what does that mean? That means that workers are going to be happy. They're going to be satisfied with the conditions of the workplace and the pay that they're getting, so they're likely to be more productive. It also means that things like boycotts or strikes, that they won't happen as much, so workers will be actually in work and working more than maybe they were before. Again, that would make them more productive. Okay, question 8. Table shows quantity demanded at different prices. For which fall in price is the demand price inelastic? So remember, inelastic means that it has to be, the total value has to be less than 1.00. So example, 0.99, that's inelastic. Okay? So if we just I'll do a calculation of the 6 to 5 and then 3 to 2, okay? We'll see if they come up with their answers. So for 6 to 5, quantity demanded 3 minus 4 divided by 3. What does that give us? Minus 1 over 3 is minus 33%. 6 minus 5 divided by 6. What does that give us? That gives us 1 over 6, which is, 16.66%, let's say. Okay. So, 33 divided by 16.66 is going to be 2, or something close to that. Okay. I'm just giving you an estimate. I don't have a calculator in front of me. 2. But we know that it's going to be bigger than 0. Or bigger than 1.00. So that's going to be elastic, not inelastic. 3 to 2, however, 7 minus 9. Remember that the percentage change in quantity demanded has to go over the percentage change in price. So percentage change in quantity demanded, 7 minus 9 divided by 7 is 2 over 7, which is, let's say, 28%. Okay. 3 minus 2 divided by 3 will be 1 over 3, 33%. Okay, so 28 divided by 33, we're going to be left with a figure below 1.00. So correct answer will be D. Okay. Look at your PED chapter. Slides and revision notes are saved on the OneDrive if you need clarification on that. Okay, this question's very easy. So an economy relies on potash, whatever the hell that is, to make fertilizer. A new deposit of potash is discovered. Which diagram shows the market change? So, very simply, if we discover more potash, what's going to happen? Our supply is going to increase because we're going to have more of it available. So it's not going to affect demand, it's going to affect supply. So we can see it's not A because they're both demand shifting, and it's not C because supply shifts left. So it will be D, supply will shift right. Quantity will increase, price will come down. Okay, what is a macroeconomic aim of a government? Okay, so what a government aims for is they aim for balance of payment stability. Okay, which is, it does include more components, but it is essentially exports versus imports. Okay, they do not want deflation, they do not want income inequality, and they do not want unemployment. In fact, what they will try and aim for is they will try and aim for full employment, having more people working. They will try and aim for reduced income inequality, in other words, income being more equal, and instead of deflation, they will try and aim for price stability. Normally, they will aim for about 2% inflation every year. So inflation is not necessarily a bad thing, it depends on the level of inflation, because we need it to grow our real GDP sometimes. Okay, what is an advantage of a market economy? This is very simple. The lowest possible price is always charged. That's not true. Market economy may have a monopoly. So an advantage is that lower prices can be charged in comparison to other types of economies, but it doesn't mean that the lowest price is always charged, because there can be monopolies that will charge a high price. The government has no need to intervene in the markets. That's not an advantage either, right? First of all, there is no government involvement in a market economy. Secondly, they do need to intervene in some circumstances, like, for example, to provide public goods. And producers and consumers have the same aim. That's wrong. Consumers have the aim of getting low prices with high quality. Producers have the aim of making profit, so their aims are definitely not the same. An advantage is that equilibrium market price will clear the market. So essentially what we're saying is price mechanism, or the market mechanism, depending on what you call it, will eventually clear the markets and restore us into equilibrium in a market economy. Okay, that's the main advantage of it also. Okay, question 4. What combination of characteristics describe a public good? Okay, so I won't spend too long on this. Public goods are non-excludable and non-rivalrous. What do those two terms mean? Non-excludable means that we can't stop anybody from using it. And to make something excludable, we need to charge a price. So private goods are excludable and rivalrous, which would be B, for example. Okay, A and D is something that you don't study in IG, but you study in AS. They're called quasi-public goods, which is where they're not exactly private, they're not exactly public, they have one characteristic of each. Non-rivalrous then means that when we use the good or the service, it doesn't reduce the amount of the good or the service that's available to others. Okay, an example of that is if I'm looking at a lighthouse, I can look at the light in the lighthouse and somebody else can look at the same time, and there will still be the same amount of light available. Whereas something that's rivalrous would be food, because if I go to the canteen at lunchtime and I start to eat all of the noodles that are in the canteen, there's going to be none left for anybody else. So the consumption, or my consumption of that product, reduces the amount that's available for other people. Okay, question 3 and question 1 are both from QP11. So again, go to that video for the full explanation. So the only one we're left with is question 2. What is an opportunity cost for a consumer spending money on a holiday? Okay, it would be the potential interest earned if the holiday money had been saved. Why? Next best alternative. So we're looking for something they lost out on because of the decision that they made. Okay, they did not lose out on the price paid for an air ticket. The decision was already made at that point, right, to go on holiday. Opportunity cost is not relating to what they did during the holiday, because we're looking at their decision to go on holiday or spending money on it. And satisfaction they get, that's not an opportunity cost. We're looking for a negative consequence of the decision. Okay, so we're always looking for what they have lost, and normally it's to do with money from what decision they have made. Okay, thanks for listening.